Some things go unnoticed. A shadow in the corner of a photograph. A doll sitting perfectly still until it isn't. At first they seem harmless, nothing more than tricks of the light or misplaced objects. But what if they aren't? What if the moment you notice them, they notice you back? Tonight we bring you two stories of things that should not exist. A photographer whose camera captures something that wasn't there before and refuses to leave. A family whose innocent purchase becomes a doorway to something much darker. Two hauntings, two warnings, but one terrifying truth. Some things were never meant to be seen, and once they find you, they never let go. If you think you could survive these stories, stay until the end. But be warned, once you've heard them, you might start noticing things you were never meant to. A shadow in the background, a whisper where there should be silence. And if you do, it's already too late. Before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, have you ever seen something in a photo that wasn't supposed to be there? Or felt a toy move when no one was watching? Let's see who's brave enough to make it to the end. Daniel had always been drawn to the forgotten places. Abandoned buildings, desolate streets, remnants of a world that once thrived but had long since been left behind. There was something about decay, about the way nature reclaimed man-made structures that fascinated him. His camera was always slung over his shoulder, ready to capture the stillness, the beauty in the ruin. That night he had been out later than usual, exploring an old industrial district on the outskirts of town. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of rust and mildew. The skeletal remains of warehouses stretched into the night, their shattered windows staring like hollow eyes. He moved carefully, stepping over broken concrete, scanning his surroundings before lifting the camera to his eye. Click. The shutter snapped, freezing the moment in time. He took a few more shots, adjusting the angle, framing the decaying structures against the fog that rolled lazily through the streets. It wasn't until he got home that he noticed it. Sitting at his desk, the soft glow of his laptop screen illuminated the room as he scrolled through the shots. Most of them were exactly what he expected. Wide angles of crumbling brick, close-ups of rusted metal, perfectly framed compositions of abandoned beauty. But then he paused. One image stood out. In the distance near the corner of the frame was a figure. It was subtle, a dark shape, slightly blurred, almost blending into the shadows of the alleyway. But it was there, too defined to be a smudge, too solid to be a trick of the light. It stood motionless, barely distinguishable from the decaying surroundings. Daniel frowned. He zoomed in, sharpening the details. The shape had no clear features, no face, no clothing, just a shadowy silhouette stretching unnaturally tall. He sat back, rubbing his eyes. A glitch. That's all it was. Some kind of exposure issue, maybe an accidental reflection from a nearby window. He had been experimenting with different settings, longer exposure times, multiple light sources. There had to be an explanation, but something about it unsettled him. He scrolled back through the photos, checking the ones he had taken earlier in the night. Nothing. The streets were empty. The alleyway where the figure stood had been completely clear. So where'd it come from? A trick of the light. That was the answer. He convinced himself of it, closing the laptop and pushing the thought aside. The rational part of his mind told him he had nothing to worry about. But deep inside, where logic had no place, a quiet, nagging voice whispered something else. It told him to look again, to see if it was still there. Daniel tried to ignore it. He told himself it was nothing, just a glitch, a flaw in the exposure, a coincidence. But the next time he went out with his camera, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He went back to his usual routine, exploring different parts of the city, capturing eerie, forgotten places. He adjusted his angles, changed his settings, did everything the same way he always had. Click, click, click. His lens framed the world in its decay, cracked pavement, rusted fences, faded graffiti, remnants of lives long gone. But when he sat down that night to review his shots, the unease returned. The shadow was there again. This time it wasn't tucked away in the corner of the frame. It was closer, In one photo, it was at the edge of a crumbling building, barely visible against the darkened brick. In another, it stood behind a lamppost, its form unnaturally still. Then, behind the skeleton of an old chain-link fence, as if it had been watching him from a distance. Daniel's fingers hovered over the keyboard. His pulse quickened. His skin felt cold. He hadn't seen anyone that night. He was sure of it. His stomach tightened. He scrolled through the next set of photos, his hands suddenly unsteady. The shadow was getting closer. At first, it had been a distant figure, something barely noticeable. Now, in the most recent shot, it was in the open, standing near an abandoned car, turned toward him. Not facing the camera, but him. Daniel's breath hitched. He zoomed in, sharpening the grainy image. The figure had no details, no face, no features, no clothing. Just a black void in the shape of a person. The longer he stared at it, the more his mind screamed at him to look away, but he couldn't. He scrolled to the next image. His breath caught in his throat. It was directly behind him. The shot was from a broken mirror he had photographed earlier that night. He remembered the moment perfectly. He had been crouching low, adjusting the angle, making sure to avoid capturing himself in the reflection. But in the shattered glass just over his shoulder was the shadow. It hadn't been there when he took the shot. He was sure of it. Daniel shoved himself away from the desk, his breath coming too fast, his chest tightening. The room felt smaller. The air was heavy, pressing in from all sides. Something was wrong. He turned slowly, scanning the room. The dim glow of his laptop screen barely reached the far corners. The shadows stretched unnaturally against the walls, flickering, shifting slightly with the movement of the screen. He swallowed hard. This was ridiculous. He was scaring himself over nothing. But then, something moved. A flicker in the corner of his eye. A subtle, impossible shift in the darkness by the window. Daniel whipped around, his heart pounding. Nothing. Just his reflection in the glass, his own face pale, his breathing uneven. But his stomach twisted. Something was wrong with the way the room reflected back at him. The shadows weren't in the right places. Daniel's chest constricted. He reached out hesitantly, placing a hand against the cool glass. His fingers trembled as his eyes darted across the reflection, analyzing every detail. Then he saw it, the silhouette, not in the room, in the reflection, standing behind him, watching, waiting. Daniel's hands shook as he slammed his laptop shut, his breath ragged. His pulse pounded in his ears, drowning out every logical thought. This couldn't be real. It wasn't real. He just needed to get rid of the pictures. That was all. He yanked his laptop open again, fingers fumbling over the keyboard as he clicked through the files. He highlighted every image that contained the shadow, every single one. His hands hovered for a moment before he pressed delete. The files vanished from the folder. He exhaled sharply, his body trembling from the tension. But then the folder refreshed. Every image was back, his chest seized. He clicked them again, dragging them to the trash, emptying it completely. He opened his photos. They were still there. He tried again and again. Nothing worked. The images refused to leave. His stomach twisted as he grabbed his camera, flipping it on. He scrolled through the memory card. The photos were still there, untouched. He went to format the card. An error message appeared. Unable to delete files. Try again later. His breathing turned shallow. He powered off the camera, pulled the SD card out, and threw it onto his desk. That was it. He was done. But when he lifted his head, his reflection in the darkened laptop screen was wrong. For a moment, his breath caught in his throat. His reflection was staring straight at him, wide-eyed, shaken. But he wasn't alone. A shape loomed behind him. Not a shadow, not a smudge. Something else. Daniel didn't turn around. He couldn't. His body had locked up, every muscle frozen, his instincts screaming to run. But the air behind him was heavy, thick with something he couldn't see, something watching him. His vision blurred as his chest tightened. He reached for his phone with numb fingers, flipping on the front camera. The screen flared to life, and he saw it. No longer just a shadow. It had shape, A humanoid figure stretched unnaturally tall, its limbs distorted, its fingers too long. The surface of its skin was wrong, like something burnt, cracked, and stitched back together the wrong way. And its face, there was nothing. No eyes, no mouth, just empty, gaping hollows where features should have been. The phone slipped from his hand. It hit the floor with a soft thud, but he didn't hear it. His ears were ringing. His pulse thundered in his skull. Then, click, the sound cut through the silence like a gunshot. His camera had taken a picture. By itself, Daniel's heart nearly stopped. He turned to the camera sitting on his desk. It was on. He hadn't touched it, hadn't powered it back up, but the screen was glowing. The lens extended, pointed directly at him. Click, another photo. Daniel's hands shook as he reached for the camera, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. He lifted it, his fingers cold against the plastic body. His thumb hovered over the review button. He didn't want to look. He already knew what he would see. But his hand moved anyway. The screen blinked, showing the last image captured. It was him, sitting in his chair, eyes wide, face pale, and standing right behind him, so close it could touch him. The figure. This time it wasn't just standing there. It was reaching for him. Daniel dropped the camera. His body finally obeyed his instincts. He bolted from the chair, stumbling back, his pulse hammering in his ears. His chest felt like it was going to collapse. The shadows in the room stretched, flickering unnaturally against the walls. He could feel something shifting behind him. The presence he had been trying to ignore was no longer just watching. It was with him. His laptop screen flickered. His phone buzzed violently on the floor. The camera, lying where he had dropped it, clicked again and again. The shutter fired repeatedly, faster and faster. Daniel didn't dare pick it up. He didn't want to see how close it had gotten. Daniel's breath came in ragged gasps as he backed away from the desk, his legs unsteady beneath him. The camera lay on the floor, its lens still extended, the screen flickering as photo after photo captured the room. The shutter clicked relentlessly, each image sealing something unseen into the digital void. He didn't want to look, he couldn't, but the screen's glow was unavoidable, illuminating the nightmare in front of him. The photos scrolled on their own, each one bringing something closer. The figure, the thing, was no longer just behind him. It was in the room. The photos showed it shifting, distorting, its hollow face inches from his own, reaching. The air around him tightened, like unseen hands closing in, fingers pressing against his skin. The walls felt farther away, the room stretching unnaturally. He turned to run, but his body didn't move. A new weight settled in his limbs, not exhaustion. Something else, something pulling him back. The camera's shutter slowed, click, click, click. Daniel's stomach twisted as he finally forced himself to look at the most recent image. It was him, but not just a photo, not a simple reflection. His own face stared back at him, eyes wide, mouth stretched in a silent scream. The expression wasn't his. It wasn't a memory, not something captured in a fleeting moment. It was him, alive, trapped. His hands trembled as he reached toward the camera, fingers hesitant, hovering above the screen. The glow from the display flickered against his skin, the pixels shifting, distorting as if the image itself was moving. And then he saw it, his own hand reaching out from inside the screen. Not a reflection, a plea. The image wasn't static. His face twitched, his mouth moving soundlessly, his fingers pressing against the inside of the frame, as if he was trying to push through, trying to break free. Daniel staggered backward, his pulse slammed against his ribs, the horror of realization crashing over him. The shadow hadn't just been following him, it had been taking his place. Click! The camera flashed. The last thing Daniel saw before the darkness swallowed him was his own reflection warping, twisting, his face melting into the black void within the screen. The camera sat in eerie silence, the lens retracting, the shutter sealing itself. On the screen, the last photo remained frozen. Daniel was gone. But his face, his desperate, screaming expression, remained trapped within the glass, watching, waiting, and then the camera powered off. The screen went dark. The final image of Daniel, his screaming face frozen inside the lens, was gone, erased as if he had never existed. But elsewhere, life continued. A different place, a different story. Have you ever owned something that didn't quite feel right? A gift, a second-hand item, a childhood toy that felt off? Tell me in the comments. And if you're still watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, because this story is just getting started. The house was warm, filled with the soft glow of evening light. The hum of the television blended with the occasional clatter of dishes being put away, a normal end to a normal day. The scent of home-cooked food still lingered in the air, wrapping the space in a comforting familiarity. A little girl sat cross-legged on the living room floor, completely absorbed in her newest toy, a vintage porcelain doll dressed in an old-fashioned blue dress. Its glassy eyes gleamed under the lamp's glow, tiny hands resting delicately in its lap. The parents sat on the couch, half watching the television, half scrolling through their phones. A documentary was playing, something about haunted objects, possessions, things people unknowingly brought into their homes. "That stuff's all fake," the father muttered, flipping through the channels. You ever notice how every creepy doll story is the same? Someone buys an old toy, weird things happen, then boom, it's haunted. The mother smirked. And yet, here we are, with that thing. She nodded toward the doll in their daughter's arms. "She's not a thing," the little girl whispered, not looking up. She was running her small fingers through the doll's soft, golden braids, completely focused. Her mother sighed. "Sweetie, where did you even find that?" "The shop on Main Street," the father answered, stretching his legs out. "That old antique place. She saw it in the window and wouldn't leave without it." The mother frowned slightly. "You let her pick out something that old?" "It's just a doll." The mother didn't respond, but something about it unsettled her. It wasn't just old. It felt used, as if it had been passed through too many hands, carrying something unseen with it. The little girl cradled it against her chest, tilting her head slightly. Her lips moved as if she were whispering. Her mother's stomach tightened. "What are you saying, honey?" The girl looked up, smiling sweetly. "She likes it here." A pause. The father chuckled, shaking his head. "Okay, now that's creepy." The mother forced a smile. "Who likes it here?" The girl hugged the doll tighter, her voice soft but certain. "The doll." The room felt colder for a second. Just a flicker of something unplaceable, like a sudden pressure in the air. The father rolled his eyes. "It's just a toy." The mother wasn't so sure, but the girl only smiled, resting her cheek against the doll's head. A moment later, she spoke again, not to them. She leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. "She says she's not a doll." The mother's breath caught. The father's smirk faded. The television flickered. A single second of static, just long enough to be noticeable. A floorboard creaked down the hall. The little girl lifted her head, still smiling. "She says she likes me best." The parents sat frozen, the warmth of the house suddenly feeling different. Something in the air had shifted. Subtle but undeniable. The television buzzed quietly in the background, its glow casting long shadows across the living room. The little girl sat on the floor, still cradling the doll, humming softly as if completely unaware of the tension surrounding her. The mother forced a smile, though her chest felt tight. "All right, sweetie, it's bedtime. Let's put your doll away and—" "I don't want to," the girl interrupted, her grip tightening. "She doesn't like being left alone." The father chuckled nervously. "Well, she's gonna have to get used to it, kiddo. Dolls don't have feelings." The little girl frowned. "She does." The parents exchanged an uneasy glance, but they let it go. Kids in their imaginations. It was just a phase, or so they thought. The first time the doll moved, they assumed their daughter had done it. The mother was walking down the hall when she noticed it, sitting at the dining table. It wasn't there before. It had been in the girl's room, resting on her nightstand. But now it was seated upright, hands delicately placed in its lap, its glass eyes reflecting the dim light from the kitchen. A chill crawled up her spine. "Honey," she called, "did you bring your doll out here?" The little girl peeked around the corner, her small face innocent, confused. "No, she doesn't like leaving my room." The mother hesitated, staring at the doll. "Then who put it there?" She picked it up carefully, expecting it to be cold like porcelain should be. It was warm. Later that night, she told her husband. He smirked, brushing it off. She probably forgot she moved it. The mother wasn't convinced, but she let it go. Until it happened again. The next morning, the father walked into the living room, still groggy, rubbing his eyes. He stopped mid-step. The doll was sitting on the couch, not just placed there, but positioned, its head tilted slightly, its hands resting on its lap like it had been posed, like it had been watching TV. He swallowed hard, shaking his head. "Jesus, kids and their pranks!" He grabbed it, carried it back to his daughter's room, and set it on the shelf. That night, when he got up to use the bathroom, something made him glance into the living room. His stomach dropped. The doll was back on the couch, facing the hallway, facing him. They started noticing more. No matter where they placed it, the doll always faced them. The little girl, unbothered, continued whispering to it. She had always been a quiet child, but now she was never alone. The parents would hear her at night, whispering in hushed tones. At first, they assumed she was talking to herself, but the more they listened, the more they realized she was pausing, like she was listening, like she was being answered. One night, the mother finally worked up the nerve to ask. "Sweetheart," she said gently, kneeling beside her daughter's bed. "Who are you talking to?" The little girl didn't hesitate. "The doll!" A lump formed in the mother's throat. "What do you two talk about?" The girl's lips curled into a small, almost knowing smile. "She tells me secrets." The mother's voice barely came out. "What kind of secrets?" The girl leaned in closer. "She says she's not a doll." The mother felt her entire body go cold. The room felt too small, the walls pressing in. She forced a shaky laugh, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "That's just pretend, sweetheart." The little girl's expression didn't change. "No, it's not." Then so softly it barely carried through the room. "She says you shouldn't have let her in." The mother's heart stopped. From the shelf, the doll stared. The change started subtly. Little things, the kind of moments that at first could be dismissed as coincidence or childhood imagination. But then they got worse. The little girl wasn't the same anymore. She still played, still smiled, still laughed. But there was something off. Something beneath the surface that didn't belong. Her mother caught her staring at the walls, not daydreaming, not lost in thought, but watching something unseen. At first, she would whisper under her breath, too low to make out the words. Then it got louder. One afternoon, the mother stood just outside her daughter's bedroom door, listening. The girl sat in the middle of the floor, cross-legged, the doll propped up in front of her. She wasn't playing, wasn't even touching the toy. She just stared. Her lips moved in slow, rhythmic murmurs, as if repeating something taught to her. The mother stepped inside. "Sweetie, what are you saying?" The girl didn't answer. Her voice continued, low, steady, completely absorbed in whatever she was whispering. A cold dread crept over the mother's skin. She took a hesitant step forward. "Honey?" The girl's head turned, too slow, too unnatural. And when she spoke, her voice wasn't hers. It was too deep, too hollow. "She says you shouldn't be here." The mother staggered backward, her breath caught in her throat. For a split second, the doll seemed to smile wider. The nights became worse. The parents woke up to the sound of laughing. It was always around 3 a.m., that unnatural hour where the world was at its stillest. The laughter would drift through the house, soft at first, then louder. It wasn't the little girl's giggle. It wasn't a child's voice at all. The first time, the father had gotten up groggily, rubbing his eyes as he stepped into the hallway. His daughter's room was dark, her door slightly ajar. The laughter stopped the moment he stepped closer. He pushed the door open. The girl was in bed, curled beneath the blankets, eyes shut tight. The doll was sitting on the dresser, facing him. The father swallowed hard. The air in the room felt wrong, like he had walked into someone else's space, someone who didn't want him there. He slowly reached for the doll, intending to move it, maybe even throw it out. But the moment his fingers brushed against the cold porcelain, a sound filled the room. A breath, not his daughter's. A breath that came from right behind him. The father spun around, nothing. He turned back to the doll. It was smiling. The activity escalated. Objects moved. The mother walked into the kitchen one morning to find every single cabinet wide open. The living room furniture shifted overnight. The chairs turned away from the couch, facing the walls, as if something wanted to watch but didn't want to be seen. They heard footsteps in the hall when no one was there. The house didn't feel like their home anymore. And then came the drawings. One evening, the mother walked past the dining table and noticed crayon sketches scattered across the surface. Simple, childlike, the way all kids draw, except for one detail. Every drawing had the same figure in the background, a tall, slender shadow with hollow eyes. She picked one up, her fingers cold against the paper. The mother turned to her daughter, who was watching from the doorway. "Honey, who is this?" The little girl smiled. "She says it's her real face." The mother's hands trembled. The doll sat on the couch, watching. The drawings got worse. At first, they were simple crayon sketches of the family, the mother, the father, their daughter. But no matter the scene, the doll was always there. In one, the family sat at the dinner table, forks in hand. The doll stood on the table, its head tilted too far to one side. In another, the parents stood in the kitchen, their backs turned. The doll was behind them, watching. Then the details changed. The colors got darker. The little girl pressed her crayons harder into the paper, breaking them, smearing them. One night, the mother picked up a drawing that made her stomach turn. It was a picture of their house. The walls were scribbled black. The family stood inside, but something was wrong. Their faces were blank. No eyes, no mouths, just empty, featureless voids. Only the doll had a face. Its grin was stretched wide, too wide. The mother turned to her daughter, who was sitting on the floor, humming to herself. "Sweetie," she forced out, holding up the picture, "why don't we have faces?" The girl didn't answer immediately. She reached for the doll, pulling it into her lap. Then, without looking up, "Because you don't need them anymore." A wave of cold rolled through the room. The mother couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong with the doll. That night, she searched online, desperate for anything, any reason this thing felt so off. She found nothing. No record of where it came from. No details about the shop where they had bought it. Like it had never existed. She dug deeper, searching for anything similar. Then she found it, an old newspaper article. She clicked it open, her stomach tightening as she read. "Family of 3 missing. House left abandoned." The photo beneath the headline made her blood run cold. It was their house, but the article was from 20 years ago. She scanned the details. A mother, a father, their daughter. All vanished without a trace. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, just gone. One last line sent a chill up her spine. The only thing left behind was a single porcelain doll sitting on the living room couch. The mother felt sick. A creak sounded behind her. She turned around. The hallway was dark. The little girl stood in the shadows, holding the doll. "You're not supposed to look that up," she whispered. The mother's breath hitched. She forced herself to speak. "Where did you hear that?" The girl tilted her head. "She told me." The whispers started that night. At first, they thought it was their daughter talking in her sleep. But when the parents checked her room, she was silent. The voice was still there, soft, murmuring. But it wasn't coming from her. It was coming from the doll. It knew their names. It whispered them over and over. "Mommy, Daddy, come play with me." The father snapped one night, storming into their daughter's room. He snatched the doll from her bed, his hands trembling. He turned, ready to throw it away, to get rid of it forever. Then he heard it. A breath. A laugh. Not from the little girl. Not from his wife. From the doll. His grip loosened. For a moment, Just a moment, it felt like something was holding his hand still. The doll's head tilted slightly, as if watching. A slow, stretching grin spread across his daughter's face. "She says you shouldn't do that." The father let go. The doll dropped to the floor, landing softly, almost too gently. The girl crawled forward, picking it up, cradling it. She smiled. "She says it's too late now." And deep in the darkness of the house, something laughed. The morning was silent, too silent. The mother stirred first, blinking against the pale light filtering through the bedroom curtains. Something felt off, though she couldn't place what. The air was still, heavy, as if the house itself was holding its breath. She turned toward her husband. He was already awake, staring at the ceiling, his face pale. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. She listened. Nothing. No cartoons playing from the TV. No small footsteps pattering against the hardwood floor. No hum of their daughter's voice drifting from her room. The mother sat up, her stomach tightening. The sheets felt too cold as she swung her legs over the edge of the bed. She reached for her robe with numb fingers, her heart thudding harder with every passing second. She walked down the hall. The door to her daughter's room was slightly ajar. She hesitated, fingers trembling as she pushed it open. The bed was empty. The blankets were pulled back neatly, the pillow undisturbed. The air smelled stale, like no one had slept there at all. Her breath caught. "Baby?" No answer. Her hands shook as she ripped the closet door open. Nothing. She checked under the bed. Nothing. She turned, frantic, her chest caving in. Then she saw it. Sitting on the bed, right where her daughter should have been. The doll, perfectly still, perfectly placed, smiling. The mother staggered backward, choking on her breath. Her throat clenched, her stomach twisting violently. Her husband appeared behind her, his face drained of all color as he saw it, his body locking in place. "Where is she?" His voice cracked. The mother couldn't answer. She couldn't move. Then, the doll's head tilted, just slightly, like it was listening, like it was waiting. They tried to destroy it. The father didn't hesitate. He grabbed it with shaking hands, fingers digging into the porcelain, resisting the urge to recoil from its unnatural warmth. They took it to the fireplace, threw it into the flames, watched it burn. The porcelain cracked, the edges darkening, curling into itself. The fire roared, embers snapping. But then, a laugh, a soft, breathy giggle. The fire died instantly. The flames vanished, snuffed out in a single breath. The doll was gone. The mother clutched her husband's arm, her fingers pressing so hard she felt his pulse racing beneath his skin. They turned. It was sitting on the couch, completely untouched. No cracks, no burns, just waiting. The father collapsed to his knees. The mother couldn't breathe. Something was in the house with them, and it wasn't leaving. Days passed, weeks. They called the police, but no records of their daughter existed. No birth certificate, no medical records, no school enrollment. Like she had never been there at all, like she had never existed. The mother screamed at them, pleaded, showed them the photos, only to find the pictures were different. The photos of their daughter? Gone. The family portraits hanging on the wall? Altered. The mother and father still stood in the frame, but in every picture, in every memory they had ever captured, their daughter was missing, and in her place the doll sat between them, smiling. The house went up for sale. No one spoke of what happened. The real estate agent smiled politely, unaware of what had been left behind. A new family moved in, a happy couple, full of hope. They had a daughter. She was about the same age, and on the first night in her new bedroom, she found something waiting for her, sitting on her nightstand. A doll in a blue dress, smiling, waiting. Two different stories, two different hauntings, but one terrifying truth. Some things were never meant to be seen. Some things should never be invited in. A camera, a doll, Two objects that should have been harmless. Tools of nostalgia, of childhood, of ordinary life. But both became doors, gateways to something else. Something that watches, something that follows, something that doesn't leave once it finds you. A photographer thought he was capturing forgotten places, until something captured him instead. A family thought they were bringing home a toy, but it wasn't just a toy. It was something older, something hungry. And now, I have to ask you, have you ever looked at an old photograph and seen something in the background that wasn't there before? Have you ever felt watched when flipping through childhood albums? Maybe you've heard the soft sound of something shifting in the dark. A toy, a trinket, something that should have stayed exactly where you left it. If you have, then maybe, just maybe, you're already playing. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done differently? And if you made it this far, like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because sometimes the next horror story is already waiting for you. This is Haunt, Fear, Horror, Stories We Dare Not Tell.